So, good afternoon once again, dear guests and colleagues. My name is Violeta. I'm a researcher at the Baroque Economic Research Center, and I'm really pleased to welcome you on this roundtable discussion devoted to gender inequality and at older age. So, joining us today are Michal Mik. You have already heard his beautiful presentation, director of CINEA Research Institute.
We need a proper introduction, definitely.
Okay, I'm sorry. Monika Oczkowska, as senior research economist at CINEA as well, and Dr. Lev Lvovsky, academic director of Baroque. You want to add something?
No.
Our today's focus is on gender inequality in later life stages, and moreover, we will focus on policies that different countries implement in order to address these challenges. And let's begin with the first question, and the first question is about why. Why should we focus on this topic right now? From an economic perspective, we often view gender inequality as main detrimental to economic outcomes, such as fertility rates, such as talent allocation, and maybe even consumption patterns as a whole. But by the time individuals reach this old age, they have already made all the important life decisions, like career, marriage, decision to have a child or kids. So why does the inequality in later life stages remains a significant economic concern? How do you think? Lev, please.
Okay, I'll try to start. So there could be several points of view. One is direct that yes, most of economic choices are already made by that time, but not all. And elderly people is a large fraction of population, and in the coming years, in coming millennia probably, this fraction of population will be even larger. So they will play larger, more important role in economics, with all the outcomes like higher demand for some particular services, for health services, different consumption patterns, which markets and businessmen should account for. So that's just from this very brutal understanding of economics. But also we are living in economics of common welfare, and elderly people are also citizens of the state. They also vote, so they are humans, so they care about their lives, and governments must care about their lives, and economists should think about ways to improve their lives, and therefore think about if there is gender inequality in these dimensions, if it's detrimental to some of the choices, to some quality of the life. We should think about policies that at least diminish this inequality. Just to advertise, for example, one of these policies, during my presentation I said that men live shorter lives than women, and we accounted for that, and because some of our audience may not survive until the lunch, according to schedule, we decided to move lunch 20 minutes earlier, so lunch will be served at 2:15. That's just as an example of advertisement.
Thank you, Lev, for such an advertisement and good news. So, by the way, we will have a small Q&A session, so prepare your questions, please. But still, we'll continue our roundtable discussion, if you don't mind. Monika, how do you think, why should we care about this issue?
Yes, following Lev's mentioning of how important this part of the population, so older part of the population, is in terms of their number and in terms of the future we're facing. So this part of the society will be only growing. There are many different aspects that one needs to consider, that policymakers needs to consider. Some already mentioned by Lev, but these people also have and follow some gender norms, which then influence the gender norms prevailing in the society. So taking them into consideration might be influential also for younger generations. They may be willing to follow whatever the older ones think, or they might be willing to change whatever is prevailing from the older cohorts.
Thank you so much. Michal, would you like something to add? I think colleagues has covered many of things.
Well, I'll make a few additional comments. I think it's, Lev sort of suggested that economists should only worry about, or the question sort of suggests that the economists should worry about the production sort of side of the economy and the output, while economics as the discipline in its foundation has both the production side and the output side and the distribution of this output. And one of the fundamental issues and the core of economics is distribution of this output in accordance to some welfare function. So when we are thinking about well-being in old age, even if all the main decisions have been made, this is still an issue related to distribution of the output and of the, you call it GDP or whatever. So I think the concern of well-being and the material side of well-being of older people is, from that point of view, an equality between women and men in old age. From that point of view, is at the heart of our discipline. Secondly, the issue relates in a longer-term perspective to the topic of contracts, or the issue of contracts. There's a certain social contract which we participate in, and the social contract, it's not written, but it's pretty well understood, I think. The social contract is that while we are, before we retire, while we work and contribute to the well-being of those who are retired today, the younger generation here, eventually when they work and when we retire, they will support our generation in old age. And this contract, once again, is part of this redistribution. It's part of a long-term labor market institutions like insurance, and therefore again is very strongly linked to economic concepts and economics as a discipline. And the credibility of this contract is crucial for our society, so to speak. So I think it's the topic of inequality between men and women and inequality in other dimensions in old age is very much related to economics and to thinking about how our economies should be structured, and to thinking how our social welfare function should be designed and thought of.
Thank you so much, and students, take notes.
Actually, may add another thought here about this, that, well, elderly people are not like coming to Earth from another planet. They are us in the future. So basically, in a sense, what you get on your pension at older age, it depends on our choices during the productive lifetime, but it's also like partial motivation to make these choices, and studying what are conditions of life of elderly people in our society, well, basically informs us and makes us to make potentially better decisions during the previous periods of our life to affect our state at the elderly ages.
Thank you. And let's talk a little bit about young generation and the collaboration between later stages people in late stages and early. So in our region, it's traditional for grandparents usually to take care of the child, like having child care. And my question is it really popular in like more developed countries, or should we assume that it's a limitation for social security system? Can we really think that this childcare is kind of unpaid work that grandparents and people at later life stages do? How do you think? Monica, please.
Mentioning childcare from the perspective of utilizing grandparents and their help is actually an interesting factor that may contribute to inequalities in older age, and actually shows differences between gender in older age from this perspective. So naturally in the region, women, so grandmothers, are definitely more likely to take care of grandkids. Though this pattern is changing, and we do observe that in the survey, in different surveys and over time. What I wanted to underline here, from the perspective of maybe inequalities between gender, is that, and actually you can discuss this, we can discuss this further, but there are many different studies that show differential effects of taking care of grandchildren for different aspects of life of grandparents. There are those who highlight how beneficial the taking care of grandchildren is for grandparents who are already retired, from the perspective of their mental health, from the perspective of their feeling of being useful for the society, for the family, for the perspective of being productive in using their time. Also from the perspective of still keeping their good health, physical health, but also psychological health, like cognitive functioning. But on the other hand, studies highlight that it really depends whether you're a grandparent, whether it's your choice to be a grandparent, and how much of this parenting you're actually doing in your life. So there are results, there are findings that in countries where there are not enough nurseries or kindergartens, and this grandparental help is kind of required or is sort of a necessity from the parental point of view, and also many women, there are higher employment rates among women, so something that we traditionally have in post-Soviet countries. So in these cases, taking care of grandchildren may be actually detrimental for health, for mental health of grandparents, because they feel overused, because they are doing this not only to spend quality time with their grandchildren, but also because they are they feel forced to do it. And maybe they spend too much time doing it. They do not have enough time for leisure, for other activities they would like to do. While, for example, in Scandinavia, where public support in terms of institutions available with childcare covers most of the, if not all, of the children before school age, grandparenting is more of a choice, and you can actually see that in the findings where the well-being of grandparents is actually increasing if they are spending some time. But usually these are the two differences. So they are spending less frequently time with grandchildren, but then their mental health is better, and taking care of grandchildren is beneficial for mental health. If this is overused, like in some countries it has to be because of the deficiencies of the system, then it might be even detrimental.
Okay, so it looks like caregiving has a positive effect when it's with a want of grandparents to give this care, and it has negative effect when it's forced, when you have to look after kids because of some other limitations. But can we come up with some policy recommendations that can control somehow this negative effect to somehow give grandparents the ability to spend their time the way they want, not by giving this care?
Well, I think that having almost full coverage for in terms of institutions providing childcare would be a way to go, because then it's actually a choice of the parents or grandparents whether the child stays in the institution for 5 hours a day or shorter, because grandmother or grandfather wants to spend more time with the kid, or has more time, or it's just they live close by. So yes, from this perspective, if the system works perfectly, then there's much more space for choice of the individuals.
Thank you. Michal, would you like to add something?
So just to follow up on what Monica mentioned, first of all, your question somewhat assumes that the grandparents are at an age when they can still take care of the grandchildren. In a lot of countries, women decide, or couples decide, to have children at an age when either the grandparents are too old and they themselves require care, or in many cases people move out and grandparents are far away. So In the first case, actually, the gender aspect is, and the policy aspect of these conditions is that we talk about so-called sandwich generations, where parents need to take care of their children, but at the same time they need to take care of their parents, of the grandparents of these kids. So it's the demographic and the social changes seem to be going in that direction rather than in the direction where 50-year-old grandparents are able to take care of the grandkids. But looking at it in a more abstract way, and again kind of drawing the discussion a little bit towards economics, economists like to think of or in terms of constraints, and I think policies should be directed at lifting these constraints. And these constraints can be of different nature. These can be material constraints. These can be institutional constraints where you just don't have childcare. But these also could be social constraints in terms of social norms. And I think in all these areas, in all these three spheres, there's potential for policy interventions and policy changes. The easiest and the most obvious one in terms of care, and I would think of care more broadly than that just childcare, because it also we also need to think of elderly care and long-term care. The obvious policy intervention there is to prepare well-functioning, like Monica said, well-functioning, easily accessible institutions to address these things. But there are other constraints. Social norms are also a constraint. And if we are moving towards a society where equality is at the core of our concerns and interests, then we should think also about these informal social norms and as constraints and try to address them. There are examples from Germany talking about grandparents and grandchildren, where introduction of parental leave for fathers actually affected the social norms of grandparents in terms of their views of who should take care of children. So it's, these things change slowly, but these constraints can also change as a result of policy interventions.
For nice examples, Lev, would you like to add something?
No, I think
Perfect. Really
already covering everything.
Good discussion. And let's talk a little bit about money and capital accumulation in the families. Throughout life in families, men and women are commonly together, they accumulate wealth that further transforms into family capital. But due to women live longer than men, women become the main manager of this wealth. So they transform this wealth to other generations or whatever they want to transfer it. And does this phenomenon has any economic consequences that female become the one who decision maker about the wealth of the family? How do you think?
Well, I think that actually in this dimension, maybe gender inequality may be one of these worst places, most detrimental effects created by gender inequality. So we kind of live in society, still live in society, we're departing from that, but we're still there, where men earn more. Men, it's common that men handle household finances, whether it be some savings or maybe family company, family firm. So men manage it during the life, but then at the end of the life, it's much more likely that this wealth or this company will be managed by a woman, by a wife, a widow, who during the life had less experience dealing with these things. So we get inefficiency from this right away. So this, I think, shows like importance that even like more importance that family finances, family business should be run more equally when both spouses are in place. Then decisions would be more efficient when one of the spouses will be dead. Something like that.
Looks like it's an argument for narrowing this gender gap in wages, mostly. So if women get earned as well as men, they will have more expertise, for example, to provide this further transfer capital. Any other ideas on this topic? Is it a problem? Do we consider it as a problem? And
Well, it has a number of consequences, and I wouldn't be so sure if women are not good at managing finances. There's a lot of research that shows that women are less likely to take risks. So in terms of investing or financial decisions, they might actually be better at that. I don't know how it goes for household finances, but presumably there's research on this aspect as well. But I think what's interesting in the kind of story that relates to what Lev was talking about, differential longevity and mortality, to what Monica was talking about in terms of widowhood, is again an area where there is certainly scope for policy interventions, in that if we are thinking about the material conditions of widows, and we're talking about 10 years, 8 years extra for widows compared to men of life, and that's quite a long span. We are talking about a situation where, in many cases, these women are in relatively difficult financial conditions from the perspective of income, okay, because their pension might be lower, or if they are working, their wages will be lower. But at the same time, they are left usually, or quite often, they are left with the wealth that has been accumulated by both partners, including their house, including maybe some other physical assets. And so we often find a situation where the widows are income poor but asset rich. And it seems that there is a potential to turn these assets into income. So that we wrote a report recently on widowhood in Poland, and showed that if you look at homeowners and you look at couples and widows, the average area of a house or a flat is literally twice as high for widows per capita, is twice as high per widows compared to couples. The obvious conclusion being that widows remain in their house or in the same flat as where they used to live with their husband, for widowers with their wife. And the natural thing to think about is, maybe that would be too much of a burden and too big a house to manage if you're just one person. So perhaps there is a way to draw on this asset, draw some income on this asset to support the income position of the surviving spouse, and turn this asset into, I don't know, a smaller flat or some sort of reverse mortgage, or there could be other policies, other ways of using the joint assets for the remaining years of life for the person who survived of the couple. And I think there is a lot of potential, certainly, for policy in that respect.
In this dimension, just a couple words. In this dimension, this is actually very relevant for Belarus. Like Belarus is full of especially widows living on like $200-300 per month in 500,000 apartments.
Well, it is relevant also in other countries as we're finding the data, and it's a potential, but it actually points towards how important some intervention is, and a quick intervention, because this is what we are observing right now, that those widows stay in their house and they are income poor, but having a lot of wealth. And this is the current situation, not something that we observed in the past. And still, okay, there are examples of how this can be handled with reversed mortgage or other types of policies, but it just points that these do not function well, at least in our countries, in Poland or in Belarus, because either no one actually uses this or knows about it, or maybe they are just not accessible, or I don't know, too expensive. The knowledge of the society might be. So there is a lot of space to actually help these widows to handle the situation better. Maybe also help from the children and younger generations.
Just to add to this topic, so this thing about income poor, like apartment rich people, together with the previous question about the role of grandparents, it actually makes me think that naturally with the age people become less mobile. They're less likely to change like the way where they live, to change place where they live, so less mobile in many dimensions. And maybe, I'm not sure of course, maybe there is room for policy that would try to make older people more mobile. So maybe some policies would make people, I don't know, more willing to again like change apartments so that they would be more income rich, or change place of living to be closer to grandchildren, because of course we have like larger and larger geographical mobility in the modern economy. So maybe there is room for that, but that's of course separate, big and complicated topic.
Yes, requires more investigation and policy analysis. And let's somehow finish a little bit our roundtable by speaking about women. As usual, speaking about women, and about triple shock that women experience while having their retirement age. So we know that women in many countries, they earn less than men throughout their lives. So gender wage gap, an obvious topic. Then we know that in many countries, women have early retirement age than men. This is the second burden. And the third one is that women outlive men while having pensions and these retirement earnings. Can we please delve a little bit into the policy measurements and recommendations that aimed at mitigation this triple burden, this triple shock? Can we address this triple shock, and can we deal with it?
I may start. I think actually in Poland you have more experience with that, with special policies. Well, so there are some trivial policies and some less trivial. One trivial is that I don't think that in a modern, non-very industrial economy there is reason for women to retire earlier than for men. Like when these retirement policies were created in 20th century, economies were much more industrial, that required much more physical strength. So and everything was different. Nowadays, with jobs and services, with more and more jobs that require mental health than physical health, so easy fix is to fix one of these three reasons, to have equal retirement age. Then we go to different schemes of how much do we want to equalize these retirement schemes. So, well, easy solution is, for example, like it's in Belarus, like in many countries, is to just have common pension calculation for everybody, which does not depend on gender. If it still depends on income, then we still run in partially to the problem, because as you said, yes, there is gender income gap. Well, try to, most policies try to equalize, to have pension less unequal than earnings that preceded that pension.
Can I briefly, so before I leave it to Michał to comment on taking gender-specific average lifetime for calculating pensions. While, well, I think I would agree that increasing retirement age for women should be a goal. There are two aspects I wanted to mention. So first of all, something that Violeta mentioned, gender gap in pay. Well, if you want women to work longer, then more should be done about decreasing the gender gap in pay throughout their life, so that they would be actually willing to work as long as possible. And the gap in pay and salary for work is one of the dimensions, and there are other dimensions of work. Quality of work is important, and more should be done about how flexible and how flexible work is, especially for older workers. Also in terms of just working conditions and the working arrangement, so that working longer would be actually possible. But in terms of other policies that try to tackle the problem of lower pensions of women, there are survivor pensions in many countries, in most of the countries, and they are supposed to cover partially for the earlier deficiencies, but still, I don't think that's the solution to the problem. Yeah, but it's not as easy as just equalizing the retirement age.
I don't think everybody knows what survivor's pension. Can you?
The survivor's pension is the scheme in the public system where the person who lives longer, so who survives the death of usually her spouse, has an opportunity to choose between her pension, her old age pension that she worked on throughout her life, or the survivor's pension, so the pension of her late or deceased husband, or part of this pension. So how it works in Poland, for example, if my husband dies, I can either choose to receive as an old age pension the benefits I worked for throughout my life, or 80% of my late husband's pension. 85% of my late husband's pension, yes.
Yes, it's an interesting policy. Maybe before, Michal, your answer, I just want to ask Monica and Lev once again, can you please explain to me what are the initial arguments behind different retirement age for women and men, including that women spend some time while giving birth to child, they're already out of labor force, they have this decreed stuff, and the amount of time on work is limited only by giving birth. So why do they have lower early retirement age?
Well, as far as I know, the history, as said, the modern pension system were first created in the beginning of 20th century, which were different from our times in several dimensions, but two most important were, first, most jobs were industrial, and you needed physical strength, men physically on average are stronger, so they can work in these harsh conditions longer. And second was that medicine was much worse, so giving birth, after giving a couple of births, it was most of women were close to modern status of disability. So it was super detrimental for female health. And of course, a century ago, average number of children in this area was 6, 8 per woman. So yeah, basically most of women could not work by this age already.
So actually in Poland, the story is a little bit more complicated. We still have gender differentiated retirement age, but in our case, it's just politics. In 2011, one of the previous governments introduced a policy of increasing retirement age and equalizing it for men and women. It used to be 60 for women and 65 for men. It was, the reform was introduced to gradually increase it to 67 for both men and women in a very slow, extended process. And it started, and the retirement age started to grow, but this was then used politically in parliamentary and presidential elections in 2015, and the policy was announced that if the opposition wins, they would actually go back to the old retirement age, 60 and 65, and that's what happened. So we still have the gender differentiated retirement age in Poland as a result of that. It seems very unlikely that this will change in the coming years, because it has become a very strongly politicized topic. And it's the current government basically says we will not touch retirement anymore. It's the same government who 10 years ago introduced longer retirement age. But the issue you touched upon is much broader, because the overall inequality, we talked about inequality, we started talking about inequality between men and women in old age. I mean, in some sense, why does it matter? Well, in some sense, it is a reflection or an illustration, accumulation of inequalities throughout life, and to tackle inequality in old age, we should really tackle inequalities throughout the life course, employment gaps, wage gaps, constraints on the labor market, constraints within the family, allocation of time within households, distribution of resources within households, it all accumulates, and then we see the end of it in old age in terms of economic and material financial differences between men and women. The policy that Monica talked about, the survivor's pension, is in some sense a way to address these issues from the point of view of this perspective that a married couple plans their life together, and there's a division of responsibilities within the couple. One of them dies, the other ought to be able to draw a little bit on the pension wealth that was accumulated by the spouse who passed away. And there can be different schemes and different ways of doing this. And we need to remember that we are not only living in an age of growing life expectancy and demographic changes in this aspect, but we also live in an age where a marriage is not necessarily the obvious lifestyle that people choose. And so we need to adjust the institutions like the survivor's pension, like the pension system overall, like different styles of partnerships to account for that, and to be able to generate incentives for men and women to think of their life course material conditions currently and later on in such a way that they are prepared for longer lives, lives in difficult medical conditions and so on, and at the same time prepare institutions to ensure those who maybe haven't managed to accumulate enough resources to pay for their necessary expenses, which may be very high in terms of long-term care, health, and so on.
Yeah, I would add a couple of things, just as the comments. Yeah, so first, Michał mentioned that nowadays that earlier retirement age of women is a political issue. So yeah, nowadays it is. So basically, because of differential mortality, in any country, majority of voters are women. So you want to vote on something that hurts majority of voters, which is kind of hard in modern democratic and prone to populism societies. And with regard to what Michał said about inequality in pensions, yeah, I fully agree. So it is hard to fight inequality after age 65 if we don't fight inequalities during the whole life before that. There are ways to do that, but they're limited. So yeah, the best ways would be, of course, if we would have lower gender wage gaps during productive years, if we would also do something with male mortality and have lower gender gap in life expectancy. So then we would, by the time of the pension, we would already come up with a more equal society. Yeah, there should be some equalizing in current conditions the pension, but yeah, we should remember that it leads to situations, sometimes like situations as extreme as in Belarus, where men are not interested in pension system at all. And then it's also not not a desirable policy, such policy which where half of society doesn't want to participate, but one doesn't want to participate in, would never be very efficient.
Yeah, they don't want, but there is no other chance how not to pay these pension benefits. Okay, I now have a question to guests. Do you have something to ask? And also to our online guests. Do you have any more questions for us to delve into? While you're thinking, maybe we can a little bit think of gender gap and life expectancy, what we've been talking about today. What policies are implemented by different countries to fight this gender gap, to a little bit narrow it? Because we see there is a big differences in in CIS countries, the gap is high. In African countries, we know the gap is low, but because of just lower age at life. And there is countries, a big portion of countries in the middle, who was able to, for some reason, to narrow this gap. Do you know some effective policies how to deal with that have already been implemented?
Well, so let me first start with I didn't talk about trends in this gap of life expectancy. The trends are they're very different. I would talk about two major ones are one trend from poor countries and one from rich countries. So from poor countries, they have trends they increase in this gap in life expectancy. They start with very low life expectancy. I mean, I talk about the poorest countries. In some of the poorest countries, 10 years ago, men actually were even living longer than women, and it was because of super severe inequality, where literally girls were not fed enough to survive. So for them, as they would become richer and richer and their life standards would become better, they would see increase in the gap in life expectancy. So they would see that their women, now in the poorest countries like Togo, Congo, women outlive men on average by half a year. So I guess in next couple tens of years, dozens of years, women there would outlive men for more, for 2-3 years. Apparently, if I would try to guess what is the natural number of years for women to outlive men, so this natural probably something like 2-3 years, something related to just biology, maybe 1 year, I don't know. And among developing countries, there is trend that we're coming from another perspective. In our country, especially in our countries in this region, women outlive men for many years, and so we should have policies that try to help men to survive longer. What are these policies? Well, I guess just working against the main contributors. So some obvious steps, but they're not easy. Some steps would be that to contribute to cultural change, to sometimes get rid of some gender norms, of some gender behavior, risky gender behavior, to make new norm for men to utilize health services more, to modernize economy so that there would be less of these risky jobs, especially bad industrial jobs where people die from bad working conditions. I don't think we need to invest a lot in research of in men's health. I think really it is more or less studied, but probably invest more in some prevention techniques, which again including to force men, make men, motivate men to go to doctors more often. Some policies like that. And policy in poorer countries, try start feed baby girls as much as they feed baby boys.
And really interesting.
Yes, I do think that different scale of the problem in countries with different development level are there, but I would emphasize here the prevention that you mentioned in different aspects. Maybe awareness campaigns that would be targeted at men specifically, that you know, some behaviors are risky, just to inform in general the society of the consequences of potential actions. What would be effective? There is research already on that. There are information campaigns and prevention campaigns that tackled problems of either breast cancer or early mortality among children, and they were quite successful. Or HIV, maybe take something from there and try to adjust it to the conditions that we have here in post-communist countries. Different types of policies for men and women, since men are more likely to die earlier, but also different design of the policies and different information campaigns of on how these work, and in order to influence the group that you want to target.
Monica, may I please just one follow-up question? Do you know any evidence on people, and especially men, awareness of the consequences of these behavioral factors that affect their longevity? Do they know about, like, tobacco is killing you? Do they know that have alcohol consumption?
Like putting pictures of, I don't know, dying lungs on package of cigarettes, whether this is successful. There is research, I'm not sure, this is another thing. I'm not sure whether this research is actually differentiated by gender, so whether they looked at the gender dimension of the results, and probably yes. And I would guess, I haven't looked at it, but I would guess that there are quite specific rules that are good to follow when you want to affect behavior or consciousness of men as compared to women, and they differ. And what type of information campaign you choose based on the gender of the group you want to target. Definitely, there is research there, which of course should be expanded, and then it should be looked further at.
Michal?
So I think in this area, actually, the policies are far easier than in the areas we talked about earlier: gender gap, gender wage gap, employment, retirement. These are really challenging and difficult areas to tackle in terms of policy. Here, I think, pretty much, as Lev said, the research has been done. We know the answers. And it's just a matter of implementing these policies. Some of that is happening in Poland. We have a lot of health awareness campaigns targeted partly at women's health issues, partly at men's health issues. There is a lot of studies that show that economic incentives work. Both ways. In Poland, the consumption and sale of alcohol increased very rapidly from the early 2000s, when taxes on alcohol were cut strongly. So, you know, we can actually have there's actually some policy complementarity in the sense that we can increase taxes on tobacco and alcohol. Increases on tobacco are happening now in Poland. We can increase taxes on tobacco and then use these incomes to do other things. And, you know, there are also, I think, relatively simple policies within already existing practices. So, for example, I don't know how it is in Belarus and in other countries, but in Poland, employees need to go to a health checkup every 2 years to see a doctor. Now, the way the current system works is that you don't really get a proper checkup. So it's more of a nominal signature of a doctor that you can do your job. If this system were used properly, and both men and women were properly checked every 2 years, you have a way to identify problems very early on, including physical health, but also including mental health. We talked about the statistics on suicides, and there's certainly a challenge for mental health specialists to address that part of the reasons behind lower longevity among men. So I think in this area, it seems that policies are relatively easy to implement. They are probably not very controversial, and the government just need to do it.
Good statement.
I would just mention that at least some controversy there is in the some of this worse for health behavior. It could be a function of other problems. So, like smoking and alcohol, which is again much more prevalent among men, could be a function of the overall stress, and so it's relatively easier to make people drink and smoke less. But it's important to keep in mind not to have these policies too fast and too strong, not to cause spike in suicides, because we can have non-drinking, non-smoking men just committing suicides, and that's also bad for health.
Don't commit suicides. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, dear experts, for your expertise, for your thinking, for your opinions. It was really great to hear all of you. Thank you, dear guests, for your attention, for your interest. I hope we somehow raised your awareness on different topics, especially men's awareness, if you know what I mean. And now I will transfer just a microphone to Lev to conclude and to make the last remarks.
Yeah, I just want to thank all the participants and our moderator and all the guests and everybody who watched us online. I hope that this event was useful in this way or another. Some of you got ideas about your health, some of you got ideas about economics, maybe some of you got ideas about data sources and potential research, where to look for it, where to start, what is done, what is not. Maybe some of you have trained your English a little bit. So hopefully this conference had something positive for all of us, and to again make it even more positive, we can go for a great lunch, and that would be the end of the day. So thank you, everybody.